Edward Brown, host of the Best of Investing, here to remind you to tune in this week on Saturday at 8 p.m. Our guest is going to be Chris Prefontaine. You're not going to want to miss this show. That's the Best of Investing on Saturday at 8 p.m. Welcome. You're listening to The Best of Investing. I'm your host, Edward Brown. Our phone number is 888-912-1190. Use that number to answer the trivia questions for a 5-pack tanning certificate given away during the show. That certificate is not sponsored by the radio station, but by Tan Bella Tanning Salon with 2 locations in San Francisco and 1 in Marin. Today's trivia theme is basketball, since we're going to be getting into the NBA playoffs here pretty soon. Today, we do have a special guest, Charles Carillo, who is from Harborside Partners, LLC. And I'll just read a little bit about Charles here. He's the managing partner of Harborside Partners, a real estate syndication firm, and has been actively investing in multifamily and commercial real estate since 2006. That was a good time to get in, huh? Since then, he has invested in over $200 million worth of investment real estate. Charles is also the host of Global Investors Podcast, where he interviews professionals about investing in U.S. real estate. Hey, Charles, welcome to the Best of Investing.
Thanks so much for having me on, Edward.
All right. So learn how important, or how did you learn how important it was about passive income at a young age?
My dad has been a real estate investor since just a few months after I was born, and it was something he owned a bunch of apartment buildings, and they weren't really like high class property buildings or like a lower grade property building. So it was like you never really want to go them. There was never anything I wanted to do. And then I remember just like it was middle school or high school, and you start like learning about what you really want to do in life and stuff like that. And the passive income was something that I just saw growing up in a upper middle class area, that you had a lot of friends that were parents were professionals, attorneys, accountants, stuff like this, and never had any time freedom. And it was something that my dad had a much less flashy lifestyle, let's just say, we had than they did, but he had a lot of time freedom, and we could go on road trips we went on a road trip for a month. I mean, as a kid growing up during the summers, we had a summer house. He'd spend weeks at a time there. And this is just something that you just didn't get from, I saw from my other friends' parents. So it was something when you're kind of crafting it, you're realizing how important it has to have recurring revenue as kind of like the basis for what you're doing.
So when you were, how old were you when you really kind of noticed, hey, you know what, my friends' parents don't really have time for my friends, so to speak, right? But my dad's been able to spend a lot of time with me.
8th grade, something like that. It was like going into high school type thing. It was in that little couple year period there. And it really, you really notice it at, I'm a Boy Scout, I'm an Eagle Scout. And it was something that you mentioned you saw there. And then also in sports, where you look back, I played lacrosse in high school and college, and it was something that, when you're running in, running back, and you see around, and at the beginning, there's like 2 parents there, right, that aren't the coach. And then, towards you get to like the last 10 minutes of it, everybody comes in and they're all dressed from work, you know what I mean? And it was something that my dad would never, he would never miss one, you know what I mean? So he would never miss anything like that.
I'm actually the same way. It's very interesting because my dad was a CPA and worked way too hard. In fact, he ended up dying at age 53 of a heart attack in the office, because too much stress, work, and all that stuff. And he hardly I think he got to see me play baseball once. And it was only when I was 17, 18, I turned like semi-pro bowling, where he only came to a couple of tournaments. Fortunately, he came to the one that I won, which was good. But I realized that when I had kids, I kind of saw the same sort of thing. I said, you know what? I don't want to be that kind of dad. Even though, I love my dad, but still he wasn't there. And so I made sure I went to every game. I may have missed maybe one in all of, from T-ball to, the majors when you're 12 years old, right? But then I was there from all my daughter's softball games.
That's
and
great.
Coached and all that kind of stuff, assistant coach. So yeah, it's so important. And the thing is, you could have made much more money, or your dad could have made much more money if he would have spent more time at the office, working on deals. But that's not for quality of life.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure.
So yeah, that passive income. Yeah. But now it takes money to make
It
money,
did.
though,
My
doesn't
dad
it?
took over a lot of the properties. Like I said, they were, as we call in real estate, they were like D or C minus type properties. So they're a little older. They're a little bit more
Okay.
in challenging areas, let's just say. And back in the 80s, when he took them
Yeah.
over, he took some of them over. People would sign them over. It's not like it is today. You know what I mean? You could sign over loans, you could
Yeah.
sign over properties.
Yeah.
So he took over a lot of them with no money down, So it was, one of those really,
Gotcha.
one of those interesting things that allowed him to build up. But yes, you do need money, especially in real estate. It's capital intensive.
Yeah. But it
Yes.
sounds like he was very creative, so that was that helped quite a bit. Okay, we're going to go to our first trivia question here, talking the NBA. And again, Charles, as a reminder, if you know the answer, don't say anything quite yet. All right. Now, this was, I think, as of at least a year or so ago. So I don't know if anybody's broken this yet. Which player has played the longest in the NBA? And I believe he's since retired. Uh, that's our trivia question. Call 888-912-1190. First caller with correct answer wins that tanning certificate. And I want to make a mention for the Palio Restaurant in San Francisco, but voted by San Franciscans as one of the best in San Francisco. So you know it's got to be good. And I've been there. It is very good. Palio Restaurant, Palio Restaurant, San Francisco. All right, stay with us. You're listening to the best of investing. Don't touch that dial. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to the best of investing. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, Charles Carillo of Harborside, Partners LLC. So, Charles, you started an online payment business in college.
Yeah.
Tell
So
us
when I
about
was
that.
during college, I was my whole goal was to get into real estate, but as we spoke about before, it's a very capital intensive business. So I wanted to start a business, and I had done some like small things. I've never had a W-2 job, anything like this. So my last job was in high school as a
Yeah,
busboy at an Italian restaurant. So the thing though is that during
there you
college,
go.
I set up a business, and we were doing payment processing, recurring revenue, and we were setting it up, and
Yeah.
I've since merged it with a partner of mine who had a similar business, and he now runs it full time. But yeah, over that time, we processed a lot. We processed over $1
Okay.
billion in payments, and we are in a pretty
Wow.
niche thing. It's not like we don't compete with Square or
Yeah.
Stripe or any of this type of stuff. So or PayPal. So it's kind of unique. So you make a little bit more money per transaction than those guys do on those side of transactions.
And how did you start that business? Because you got to go out and sell
Yeah, it
yourself,
was
right, to companies.
so for the first year or so, I was running a business which was business services to online companies, and then I really narrowed the focus after about a year. So it was like really like 2006. I graduated college in '06. So really 2006 I really narrowed the focus into payment processing. It was the other
Mm.
parts of it were too
Yeah.
hectic. There wasn't enough margin, stuff like that. And I met with a partner in Chicago
Yeah.
that really taught me the ropes of what I was doing, and worked with them for decades. So it was something that really learned the business from the inside out, and it's great because you're able to really build a portfolio of companies and clients. So it was awesome. It was a great way of doing it.
Okay. All right. So, talk about the fact that you purchased your first multifamily property in 2006, and then your first commercial
Yeah.
property in 2009.
Yeah,
Tell us
so
about that
I'm
history.
from a small town. I live in South Florida now, but I'm from a small town in Connecticut, and it's outside of Hartford. And so we have a lot of plethora of three family and small multifamily properties in this area. And I purchased the three family property. Now they call it house hacking, but back then it was just buy one property, live in one of them, rent out the other two. And I had this like drilled into my dad, from
Yeah.
my dad, drilled into me about this is the way you're going to start. This is the best way of doing it. So I went out, I found a property. It was about a
Yeah.
mile and a half from where I went to college. So I rented out most of the DR2 floors and bedrooms and stuff went to college kids that I knew. And yeah, that was the first thing really of dipping my toe into being a landlord myself. And I self-managed that property. Handled everything. And it wasn't
Mhm.
too much. And then a couple of years later, I purchased another one. And then everything fell out. That was second one I bought was like October,
Yeah.
and remember directly, it's October 1st, 2008. And that was like right after Lehman, but like right before Madoff came out. Like every time you turned on like
Yeah.
CNBC, the whole world like melted down. So it was like it was pretty
Yeah.
crazy. But '09, it was just like it didn't look like it was ever going to come back. And I purchased a commercial property from a bank that had on the market for like 4 or 5 months and completely vacant. There's people like, on the front porch hanging out, all this stuff. And I purchased it, and like I think within 100 days, I had the whole thing renovated and had it rented out. So it was only 5 units. I mean, it wasn't a huge thing, but it was something that it was like my beginning into getting. It was like some apartments with storefront underneath and stuff like that. And I took one of the storefronts for my office and then rented out the rest of the property.
How many
Oh
square feet
man, the
was
whole
it?
property was probably, it wasn't big. It was probably 5 or 6 thousand square feet. So there's some smaller apartments in there, and then there was also
Okay.
some 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, stuff like that. But no, I
Do you
sold
still
it.
own it?
I sold at the beginning of 2022 to a portfolio. I sold it as a portfolio with all my other properties I had starting in Connecticut to a buyer out of New York City.
What did you end up
I
doing with the
invested into
cash?
more real estate, some better properties. These were
Okay.
these are older
Right.
properties. They were in need of they were going to need at some point some quite some investment in getting rid of some, redoing a lot of things that over time you just have to do. You know what I mean? And this investor paid me really well for them, and so I sold it. But I took the money and invested into better properties down in Florida, like probably 3 or 4
Yeah.
different properties in Florida, Atlanta, and Dallas.
Kind of interesting, especially the Florida market's been pretty
Yeah,
hot, hasn't it?
Florida, there's no lack of people moving into Florida. So, and it's all different parts of it. I mean, so
Yeah, I know.
draws to all different parts of the state. So it's crazy. I mean, it's definitely, the growth is just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, what do they say? A a conservative is a liberal. Let's see, wait. A liberal turns into a conservative after he's been mugged, or something like that. And with socialism, where Margaret Thatcher said, socialists they when they run out of other people's money, something along those lines. Yeah, kind of crazy. When we come back, we want to talk about the pros and cons of self-managing and pros and cons of passive investing. Wow, because so far it all sounds positive, but there's got to be some downside there. Okay, let's see here. The second trivia question on the NBA: what is the average height in the NBA? The average height in the NBA. Call 888-912-1190. First caller with the correct answer wins that tanning certificate. I also want to make a mention here for the Transcendence Theater. Go to bestnighthever.org. You're talking about like Broadway performances here in the San Francisco Bay Area, primarily in Sonoma County. I've been to a number of their performances. They are fantastic. Always walk away happy and singing some of the songs and all that. And so check them out, bestnighthever.org. All right, we are in the studio here on Zoom with Charles Carillo of Harborside Partners, LLC. And audience, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of passive investing. Welcome back to The Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, along with my special guest, Charles Carillo of Harborside Partners, LLC. Our second trivia question: what's the average height in the NBA? What do you think, Charles?
I would say 7.
Well, somewhere between 4 foot
I
and
would
8
say
foot. Go ahead.
7'1".
No, actually,
Really?
it's
I
six
guess
foot
you have
six.
guards. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the average height. Kind of interesting. I don't know if you do it by, mode, median, or mean, whatever. Um, all right. So Charles Carrillo of Harborside Partners, LLC. All right. Give us the pros and cons of self-managing and pros and cons of
Yeah,
passive
so I
investing.
started when my dad was building up his portfolio. He was doing all self managing, and he had like a small team of people. And I kind of learned the ins and outs of it. So for the first 6 years of owning my own properties, I self managed them, and it was a huge benefit because I really
Yeah.
learned all the ins and outs of how to manage the properties, deal with the vendors, deal with the contractors, and it was another education in itself.
Yeah, I bet. You probably had some horror stories and some
Yeah,
success
success stories.
stories.
People always, I've been asked on the like horror stories before, and nothing too much, nothing too bad. I
Okay,
think it's
good.
just you work with tenants that are going through a difficult time or a challenging time, and that's the name of the
Yeah.
game, especially when you're working with what we call C-class properties. So it's just working class
Yeah.
people. That's where you're working something out. Somebody has a they're a little late on the rent. You do this, you do that. I think when you start neglecting the properties or are just 100% by the book all the
Yeah.
time, that's when you really start having
Yeah.
tenant issues.
I think a good point. And all these properties were fairly
Yeah,
close
when
to where you live.
I was still living in one of my three family, and all the other ones, I like strategically bought them within like a half mile, I think, of each other. So you could literally walk to them if I
Smart.
wanted to during
Yeah, that way you
snowstorms. But
could.
it was like, yeah, it was made it much
Yeah,
easier
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
manage them. Because if I was driving like 15 here, an hour, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Well, so yeah, especially if you have a bunch of properties, a bunch of tenant toilet issues and stuff like that. Uh, so what that was the pro part of self managing. You could be hands on and you did it very very close. What would you consider to be a con?
It's uh, it's very low paid and it's very low paid, and you deal with a lot of hassles, and it's a thankless job. So
Yeah, takes a
yeah,
lot of time
it
too,
takes
I
a lot of
guess.
time knowing her that, and
Okay,
that's why, especially if you're highly paid in a professional industry, it's not the thing to do.
not the thing. Okay, what about the pros and cons of
Well,
passive
coming right off the
investing?
back with that, it's really for people that are highly paid, that might be in a successful career, successful business, professional of some sort. That is
Yeah,
where passive investing becomes a huge benefit because you're getting a bunch of the upside with minimal, if any, downside on the properties. S- so
okay. You just have to make sure you're working with the right
yes,
team.
the lack of control
That's
would
really
be
that's
when you're
is
in
really
cons, it'd be
important.
like lack of control and dealing with people that might not be as have you and their forethought when they're making decisions on the property. So really
Yeah,
vetting those people is important in really anything you're investing into. So it's really just knowing who you're actually working with because the legal system is not going to help you and only the attorneys are going to make money. So that's kind of like a
yeah.
thankless, that's just like a bottomless pot.
Well, especially now when you hear these horror stories of what goes on in New York with
Yeah.
the squatters and some lady, the owner gets arrested for going into her own property, and I think that they're ready to change that law. Which is, what they don't realize is that it just brings all
No.
of society down. It's
That's why
just
there's a lot of people
terrible.
that aren't
Yeah.
investing in those places
Um,
anymore, and that's why. I mean, I'm originally from Connecticut. Connecticut's not New
yeah.
York, and it's not California, so it's not up to that level. However, I mean, we still when I moved from Connecticut to Florida, and I mean, it was night and day between the laws and COVID. The same thing. I mean, we had people, which I know there's people listening to this in California that
Yeah.
are landlords, and they're like, "This is nothing like what happened here." However, with properties I had, and this is one of the things I had for
Yeah.
exiting out of my Connecticut properties was I mean, I had people in there for a year and they even switched their electricity out. And my attorney was like, okay, now we can start like evicting them. They've been in there for like a year and a half. They just turned it back on in Connecticut, like eviction. So there's a big backlog. And you couldn't go after them for any back rent or anything. I had to because it still was in their favor. And if it was a government sponsored loan or something like this, you couldn't go after them at all. Luckily, I had like community banks, so it wasn't government insured loan, but it's just like, I mean, I was
Mm.
lucky enough to have a reserve and to have other apartments and people paying. But the thing is, what happens if they're
I
not?
know, but the thing
Yeah,
is that they may. What's the deal about everybody making their problem your problem? And if the government was going to go in and start giving people checks, the first thing they should have done was pay their rents
right.
to the landlords. Don't make the landlords pay for that's what just drives me crazy. That's why I've complained about, and I don't own any multifamily, but I look at this and I say, like with rent control, and we've talked about this on the air before. The problem, one of the big problems with rent control is that the landlord can't go to the utility companies or the insurance companies or the roofers or the plumbers and say, "Hey, rent control, you can't raise, your fees on me. You have to do it for this price."
Yeah.
They're going to say no. So it's a one-way ticket, which is or one-way street, as they say, which really isn't fair. Tell you what, we're going to go to our third commercial break here. Do want to make a mention here also for Diversified Mortgage Expo. I will be there in Tennessee, beautiful Tennessee, Nashville, May 30th through June 1st. Actually, I'll be there in case you want to come meet me there. that we'll be talking about discounted mortgages. It ought to be really good because we have our discounted mortgage fund called the Southwest Note Fund that I manage. And so far, so good. Everyone's very happy with it. All right, here's our third trivia question. Who was the youngest, and this is I'm talking about the NBA, who was the youngest regular season MVP? And I'll say this has been in the last 15 years. So you don't have to go back to like Wilt Chamberlain or anybody. Who was the youngest regular season MVP? Call 888-912-1190. First caller with the correct answer wins that tanning certificate, which, by the way, is worth about $100. So that's a really nice prize. Stay with us. You're listening to The Best of Investing with Edward Brown and special guest Charles Carillo. Harborside Partners. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Best of Investing. One more time, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, Charles Carillo of Harborside Partners, LLC. Third trivia question on the NBA. Who is the youngest regular season MVP? It's a little harder, than your average bear. If you don't know the answer, Derrick Rose. And I think he was with the Bulls when he came out of college. All right. So, Charles, you're quite the expert on real estate. I think I could say that. So we have another question here. Completing real estate projects with your own money before raising funds.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I do some mentoring for up and coming multifamily investors, and one of the things I always stress with them is before you start taking money from other people, whether it's even family members. And some people, they want to take it from their family members, they want to take it from their friends, and like do one deal, no matter how small it is. It could be 1, 2, 3 units, rent it out, see how the whole thing goes, get that proof of concept, which is so important when you're starting any business. And then at that point, you're going to learn so much knowledge, and then you can roll it into future investments. And but from my
good advice. Okay. And building a scalable business, how would you recommend?
So one of the
doing
things
that?
we did to really scale out our business, even with our payment company and then now into real estate, was that we first of all put together systems, and we really put together so much automation as we could to take out a lot of parts. And it helps you when you're bringing on new team members. If everything, you have a system and you have your documented processes there, it makes it much easier for bringing new people in. And then say if those people leave at some point, you don't have to go through a whole process again. You already have set documentation, set videos that we would do. And it was really difficult when I brought in like my first assistants and first admin people, because but then I would do it, and we're hiring another person right now, and I'm making like Zoom videos and screen shares as I'm just doing stuff, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I keep a list of stuff I just don't want to do anymore, and I just like whittle away at that list as I do it. And I just make videos of everything, and then I just put it into like Google folder or Google Drive there, and I'm just like dropping like, all right, here we go. This is something else. Like, just learn this and understand that. And it must be the most boring thing ever to watch, but I mean, it is what it is.
All right. I tell you what, while we're still on, I'm going to shift gears for just a minute here. I do want to talk a little bit about what we're doing or what these guys are doing at Scottsdale Mortgage Investments. So they have a platform where it's called the Trade Desk, and they allow people to sign up on the trade desk to take a look at their inventory to buy discounted mortgages, very similar to what we do in the Southwest Note Fund. In fact, we end up buying loans from them ourselves. And you can go to Scottsdale Mortgage Investments or just go to mortgageinvesting.com and sign up for their trade desk. And then they'll send you a tape. You can take a look at it, and then they'll be having Zoom calls where they'll go over the various loans that they have for sale. And some of those loans are pretty small. They might be $10,000, $20,000. So you don't have to have millions of dollars to start. And then they also do have some loans that are in the hundreds of thousands. So it's kind of a good way, again, for someone to kind of get started. And, if you're buying a mortgage and it's discounted, you might not actually end up with the property, but you could still end up with a pretty good rate of return if it gets taken out at foreclosure. Or you might get lucky enough to actually do the full foreclosure and end up with the property at 30 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar, et cetera. And so you can make a lot of money potentially doing that. So you should check them out, Scottsdale Mortgage Investments. Also want to let people know on our Southwest Note Fund, we're still paying 8.5%. And it's like a mutual fund, except that we don't have stocks and bonds. We have just these discounted mortgages throughout the country, primarily in Texas, but we've expanded. We've got some in Florida, and South Carolina and North Carolina, and some in Pennsylvania and Connecticut, and New York. So check us out there. You can go to the parent company, which is PacificPrivateMoney.com, and check on the Invest Now, and then just take a look. We've got a few different funds. One of them is a Freedom Fund, where it is like a bank in that they originate mortgages. So they're not buying discounted ones there. They're originating them. And of course, nothing's FDIC insured because, we're dealing in mortgages. But they're paying anywhere from 8, 9, or 10%, depending upon how much money you can invest. So again, check them out at PacificPrivateMoney.com and see what's available. You have to be an accredited investor, and so they'll teach you about that. All right, let's see here. We've got about a minute and a half. I've got a few more list of questions, but what do you want to cover just in this minute and a
Whatever
half?
else you see that's interesting.
Oh, okay. All right. How about building a team that will help you achieve your goals and choosing partners?
So when I got into the only way I've really been able to really scale, because I have a partner in our payment processing business that really handles everything. I don't work there anymore, and it's something that having a partner that comes on board that you guys have the same vision for. And the first property I bought in '06, I
Yeah.
remember sitting at the closing table and there were some delays with the two partners that I was purchasing it from, and they
Uh-huh.
told me about how they had a failed partnership before with someone else because he was an older gentleman. They were
Yeah.
younger in their
Yeah.
20s, or one of the guys was younger in his 20s before he found the other gentleman. And he said it just didn't work because they were on different paths. So, really finding a partner that
Yeah.
really you have the alignment of interest, and you really have the same goal, same time frame of what you want to invest into. It's super important.
Yeah. I've heard that sometimes a partnership is more of a marriage than a marriage. And
For
it's
sure.
harder to get out of too. I don't think they have no fault. They have no fault divorces, but no fault partnerships. I'm not sure if I heard of that one before. All right, audience, no trivia question now. We've already asked our 3 trivia questions. We will be coming back with some closing comments and our fun thoughts for the day. So stay with us. You're listening to the Best of Investing. Don't touch that dial. We'll be Welcome back to the Best of Investing. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, Charles Carillo of Harborside Partners LLC. Excuse me. Um, so I wanted to kind of go through investing in different asset classes. Why don't you just give us a little education on
For
that?
different asset classes within real estate, you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, every asset class is a little different of how you invest into it. So we focus in multifamily. So we focus on apartment buildings. Mainly, we're buying 80 or 100 plus unit apartment buildings in the southeast, and very landlord friendly states. But there's other asset classes have different pros and cons. So we have something where obviously everybody tells you they need a place to live, but there's other people that will be out there and they're
Yep.
saying that properties are getting more expensive, and the cheapest place now for people to live if they want to own something is a mobile home park. So now you see that mobile home parks are something
Yeah.
where it's the closest to living in a single family house without anywhere near the cost. And then you have other investors that might say
Yeah.
self-storage is a great investment, which all these can be. And the self-storage is the pro there is you don't have to really worry with everything we were talking about earlier in this program about really a lot more government interference because you're not dealing with someone's house. And it's something that's automatically bills on
True.
someone's credit card every month if it's done correctly. So it's something that it's much easier to collect. People stay there longer, and so figuring out exactly where you want to invest or possibly invest in multiple classes, and that's one of the real benefits of passive investing, where you can set aside a capital that might be for one deal you did yourself actively. You might be able to invest into 3 or 4 different deals.
Yeah. Also, the one nice thing about storage is the fact that the obsolescence doesn't really happen much. These steel containers usually kind of stay in existence. I noticed one other thing we had here, and again, we'll do this before we end the show: enlisting the services of virtual assistants as soon as possible. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit
So
about
when we were
that.
talking about before about scaling, like the first step I found for really expanding the business was taking a lot of things off my plate. And the easiest way of doing that, which was a new phenomenon several years back, which was really virtual assistants. And it's one thing I really stress to people that are starting out or that are right around that way of where they're getting tasks that are really eating away at their time. They're really their production, their capital making time, their money making time. And it's really, that was the first thing that I really took off my plate. Like a lot of small tasks where you'd have stuff for your website, stuff for your email list, contacting different people, scrubbing your inbox, you know what I mean? Or giving them an inbox where people contact and then they're
Yeah.
giving you the emails that actually make sense. Because anybody that's really gotten that, that public email, you see everything that comes through and not much of it's what, somebody has to do that owns that business.
Yeah.
So,
Someone says, what do I do for a living? I go through my spam box and erase things.
exactly.
Delete, delete. Yeah. And let's see, one more minute here before we have to leave. Integrating artificial intelligence. How do
So
you throw that in
when
there?
we've worked with anything, with any of our automations that we've done when we've scaled, we've always put in. There's always been some level of AI with it, and mainly as part of it through like our text messaging or our emailing, where when someone comes through, whatever it might be, it is something that if someone comes through one of our websites for investing in real estate, harborsidepartners.com, then it's like we get in there. They're already setting up a call with us. They already have us on we already have them on one of our drip emails. We already have them getting our newsletter and doing this all behind when we used to do this manually, adding lists and lists in here, and then figuring out exactly, because you can now use AI to really score how strong and the strength of that investor to actually possibly invest with you. And now you can spend time with some of your contacts that might actually be more likely to invest than others.
Great. Charles Carillo, Harborside Partners. Pleasure, LLC. Pleasure having you on. Here's our thoughts for the day. So I dreamt one time that I was Ebenezer Scrooge. And after I was in the dark, after not paying my PG&E bill, utility bill, I was visited by the ghost of Christmas past due. And give a man a gun and he will rob a bank. Give a man a bank and he'll rob everyone. All right. And with that, thoughts for the day. Tune in next week, audience, to The Best of Investing. We're going to be giving away more free prizes for answering trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm Edward Brown, wishing you the best of investing. So long.